My name is Lucienne, and I'm 32 years old. After 7 years of marriage to Daniel, I never imagined I'd discover his betrayal in such a devastating way. It started with missing lingerie and perfume that seemed to disappear. My sister Natalie had grown strangely distant, avoiding eye contact whenever Daniel was mentioned. When my instincts screamed something was wrong, I made a decision that would change everything. I faked a business trip and came home to the ultimate betrayal. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had your instincts save you from an even longer betrayal. Now let me tell you how I uncovered the painful truth. I met Daniel at my college friend's wedding 9 years ago. He was the best man, tall with dark hair and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I was immediately drawn to him, and we spent the entire reception talking about everything from our favourite books to our dreams for the future. By the end of the night, I knew there was something special between us. Daniel was an architect with his own firm, passionate about creating spaces that brought people together. I worked as a marketing executive for a cosmetics company, helping brands tell their stories. We both loved our careers, and in the beginning, we supported each other's ambitions wholeheartedly. 2 years after meeting, we got married in a small ceremony by the lake. It was perfect, intimate, and full of love. Soon after, we bought a beautiful colonial-style house in the suburbs with a spacious yard where we imagined our future children would play. We spent weekends renovating it together, laughing as we painted walls and assembled furniture. Those were some of the happiest days of my life. My younger sister Natalie had always been an important part of my life. Growing up, we shared a bedroom in our parents' modest home, staying up late to whisper our secrets and dreams. Though we were 3 years apart, we were incredibly close. I protected her from school bullies and later helped her navigate her first heartbreaks. When I moved out for college, she cried for days. After I married Daniel, Natalie remained a constant presence in our lives. She was a bridesmaid at our wedding and spent many holidays and weekends at our home. Daniel always seemed to get along with her well, treating her like a sister of his own. At least that's what I thought. 6 months ago, Natalie went through a difficult divorce from her husband of 3 years. She was devastated, and without hesitation, Daniel and I offered her our guest house to stay in while she got back on her feet. It seemed like the perfect solution. She would have her independence, but wouldn't be alone during such a challenging time. That's when things began to change, though. The shifts were so subtle at first that I nearly missed them. Daniel started working later than usual, coming home smelling of a perfume I didn't recognize. When I mentioned it, he claimed it was from hugging his female colleague who wore strong fragrances. I wanted to believe him. Then came the password changes. Daniel and I had always known each other's phone passwords, not because we snooped, but because we had nothing to hide. Suddenly, he changed his without telling me. When I asked him about it casually, he became defensive, accusing me of not trusting him. "Why do you need to get into my phone anyway?" he snapped one evening. "Don't you have better things to do than check up on me?" His reaction shocked me. In 7 years of marriage, he had never spoken to me with such irritation. Around the same time, I noticed some of my expensive lingerie items disappearing from my drawer. A black lace teddy that Daniel had bought me for our anniversary, a red silk slip that I saved for special occasions. When I mentioned the missing items, Daniel shrugged and suggested I had misplaced them. What hurt even more were the small criticisms that began to slip into our conversations. Daniel, who had always complimented my appearance, started making comments about my weight, suggesting I should try harder to stay in shape. When I dressed up for date night, his compliments felt hollow and forced. Meanwhile, Natalie began acting strangely too. Once open and warm, she became secretive frequently, cancelling our sister lunch dates with vague excuses. When we did spend time together, she seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly and jumping whenever it buzzed. One weekend, Daniel told me he was attending an architecture conference in Boston. It seemed legitimate. He showed me the conference website and talked about the speakers he was excited to hear. But throughout the weekend, he posted nothing on social media, which was unusual for him. When he returned, his stories about the event were vague and inconsistent. "Who was the keynote speaker again?" I asked casually over dinner. This famous Japanese architect," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "You wouldn't know him. When I checked the conference website later, I saw that the keynote had been delivered by a woman from Denmark. My friend Jessica was the first to voice what I had been afraid to acknowledge. Over coffee one afternoon, as I recounted these small incidents, her expression grew increasingly concerned. "Lucienne," she said gently, "I don't want to plant ideas, but these are classic signs of cheating, the defensiveness, the lies, the criticism. It's like he's trying to justify his behavior by finding fault with you." "But who would he be cheating with?" I asked, my stomach knotting with dread. Jessica hesitated before answering. "Have you considered that it might be someone close to you, the timing with Natalie moving into your guest house?" I cut her off immediately. "No, that's impossible. Natalie would never do that to me. And Daniel, he's not perfect, but he wouldn't cross that line." But Jessica's words planted a seed of suspicion that I couldn't ignore. That night, I lay awake beside Daniel, listening to his steady breathing and wondering if everything I believed about my marriage was a lie. The thought that my husband might be cheating on me with my own sister was too painful to contemplate, but once the seed was planted, I couldn't uproot it. I began to notice things I had previously overlooked. The way Daniel's eyes followed Natalie when she entered a room, how they sometimes exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. The sudden silence that fell whenever I walked in on their conversations. One evening, I came home early from work and found several text messages on Daniel's iPad, which he had forgotten to take with him to a client meeting. The messages were from Natalie sent at 2 a.m. the previous night when I had been asleep and Daniel had claimed to be working late in his home office. "Can't stop thinking about you," one message read. "Yesterday was incredible." My hands shook as I scrolled through the conversation. The messages weren't explicitly romantic, but they were intimate in a way that made my stomach churn. They referenced inside jokes I wasn't part of, plans made without my knowledge, and a shared secret that hung unspoken between the lines. That same week, I went looking for my favourite Victoria's Secret lingerie set. A turquoise lace bra and matching panties that Daniel had always loved. They were missing from the drawer where I kept my special occasion underwear. So was the expensive perfume Daniel had given me for Christmas, a custom scent that had been created specifically for me. Could Natalie be wearing my lingerie for Daniel? The thought made me physically ill. I needed more evidence before confronting either of them. If I was wrong, I could destroy both relationships based on paranoia and misunderstandings. But if I was right, I needed to be prepared for the fallout. One afternoon, I overheard Daniel on the phone in our backyard. He was speaking quietly, but the sliding glass door was partially open, and his words drifted through. "She doesn't suspect anything," he was saying. "No, don't worry about that. She trusts me completely." A pause. I know. We need to be careful." Another pause. "I love how you think. That's why we're perfect together." When he came back inside, I pretended to be absorbed in a magazine, my heart pounding so hard. I was sure he could hear it. He kissed the top of my head casually, as if he hadn't just been discussing how to continue deceiving me. That night, I lay in bed formulating a plan. My company had an annual marketing conference in Chicago coming up in 3 weeks. I was expected to attend, but I could easily get out of it. My boss owed me a favor, and I had enough seniority to miss 1 year without raising eyebrows. What if I pretended to go? What if I told Daniel and Natalie I would be gone for 3 days, but actually stayed in town to see what happened in my absence? The idea took root and grew. I would need to create convincing evidence of the trip. Flight confirmations, hotel reservations, a conference agenda. I would need a place to stay while I was supposedly in Chicago. And I would need a way to monitor what happened at home. The next day, I began putting my plan into action. I created fake email confirmations for flights, and a hotel using templates from previous business trips. I downloaded the conference schedule and highlighted sessions I would attend, adding them to my shared calendar where Daniel could see them. I told my boss the truth, not about my suspicions, but about needing a few personal days. She was understanding and agreed to cover for me if anyone asked. Jessica offered her apartment as my base of operations. "You can stay with me as long as you need," she said. "And if you're right about what's happening, well, you shouldn't be alone when you find out." I ordered small cameras disguised as household items, an alarm clock for the bedroom, a smoke detector for the living room. They would activate when they detected motion and would stream the footage directly to my phone. Installing them while Daniel was at work and Natalie was at a job interview made my hands shake with anxiety. Was I becoming the kind of paranoid, untrusting wife I had always pitied? But my instincts were screaming that something was wrong, and for once, I decided to listen to them. A week before my fake trip, I announced it at dinner where both Daniel and Natalie were present. "I'll be in Chicago next Thursday through Sunday," I said casually. "The annual marketing conference. It's mandatory this year." Daniel's face showed just the slightest flash of something, excitement, relief, before settling into an appropriate expression of disappointment. "That's too bad, honey," he said. "I'll miss you." Natalie kept her eyes on her plate. "When do you leave again?" "Thursday morning, early flight." I took a sip of wine, watching them both carefully. "I hope it won't be too boring this year." "I'm sure you'll have a great time," Daniel said, reaching for my hand across the table. "You always network so well at these events." Was I imagining the eagerness behind his supportive words? The way his thumb stroked my wrist felt mechanical, rehearsed. "I can check in on Daniel while you're gone," Natalie offered, still not meeting my eyes. "Make sure he's not eating takeout every night." "That would be great," I said, squeezing Daniel's hand a little too tightly. "I'd appreciate you looking after him." The days leading up to my trip were excruciating. I packed a suitcase, as if I were really going, carefully selecting outfits appropriate for a business conference. I printed boarding passes and placed them in my travel wallet where Daniel could see them. I even purchased a small gift for Daniel from the airport shop, something I always did when traveling for work. Meanwhile, I packed a separate smaller bag with essentials to take to Jessica's. I withdrew cash so I wouldn't leave a trail of credit card transactions in town. I tested the cameras multiple times, ensuring they were working properly and that the footage was clear. The hardest part was maintaining a normal demeanor. Every time Daniel kissed me, every time Natalie asked about my conference plans, I wondered if they were secretly laughing at my ignorance. Was I being paranoid? Or were they counting the hours until I would be gone, the night before my departure? Daniel made love to me with an intensity that briefly made me question my suspicions. Afterward, as he held me close, I almost confessed my plan, almost begged him to tell me the truth, so I could cancel the whole charade. But then he whispered, "I have some work to catch up on while you're gone. Don't worry if I'm hard to reach." And just like that, my resolve hardened. The next morning, Daniel drove me to the airport, my suitcase in the trunk, my heart in my throat. He kissed me goodbye at the departures curb, a quick peck that felt like a dismissal. "Have a safe flight," he said. "Text me when you land." I watched him drive away, then waited 30 minutes before calling an Uber to take me to Jessica's apartment. It was time to discover the truth, whatever it might be. Jessica's apartment was a cozy one-bedroom in a high-rise downtown with large windows overlooking the city. She had cleared space in her closet for my things and set up her spare laptop on the kitchen table so I could monitor the camera feeds. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked, as I obsessively checked the app on my phone. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. "I need to know," I replied, unable to look away from the screen. One way or another, for the first few hours, nothing happened. The house remained empty and quiet. I texted Daniel as promised, telling him I had landed safely in Chicago. His response was quick but brief. "Glad you arrived safely. Enjoy the conference." I tried to distract myself by helping Jessica prepare dinner, but I checked my phone every few minutes. What if the cameras malfunctioned? What if Daniel and Natalie met somewhere else? What if my entire suspicion was just a product of my insecurity? At 6:32 p.m., the bedroom camera activated. Daniel entered, changed his clothes, and spent an unusual amount of time grooming himself. He put on cologne and one of his more expensive shirts. He was getting ready to go out or getting ready for someone to come over. At 6:45 p.m, my phone rang. It was Natalie. "Hey sis," she said, her voice artificially bright. "Just checking in. How was your flight?" "Fine," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Just getting settled in the hotel. How are things there?" "All good. I thought I might drop by and bring Daniel some dinner later. Make sure he's not just eating cereal, you know." My heart raced. "That's thoughtful of you. I'm sure he'd appreciate that." "Well, I promised I'd look after him," she said with a laugh that sounded forced. "Anyway, enjoy your conference. Love you." She hung up before I could respond. At 7:15 p.m, the living room camera activated. Daniel was arranging wine glasses on the coffee table. 2 glasses. He opened a bottle of expensive Cabernet that we had been saving for our upcoming anniversary. My hands shook so badly that I nearly dropped my phone. Jessica placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to watch this right now," she said gently. "We can turn it off, call the police, do something else." But I couldn't look away. It was like watching a horror movie where you know the monster is about to appear, but you still can't close your eyes. At 7:30 p.m, the doorbell rang. Daniel smoothed his shirt, checked his reflection in the hallway mirror, and went to answer it. It was Natalie. She was wearing a trench coat and carrying an overnight bag. "Did anyone see you?" Daniel asked as he pulled her inside, closing the door quickly. Natalie laughed. "No one who matters. She's probably sitting in some boring workshop right now, poor thing." They embraced a long, passionate kiss that made me physically recoil from my phone. Jessica gasped beside me. "I've been waiting all day for this," Daniel said, his hands already working to untie Natalie's coat. She stepped back teasingly. "Patient men get better rewards," she said. "I have a surprise for you." She slipped off to the guest bathroom with her bag, while Daniel poured the wine. When she returned a few minutes later, my world collapsed completely. Natalie was wearing my missing turquoise lingerie set along with my silk robe. She had even sprayed my custom perfume. I could tell by the way Daniel closed his eyes and inhaled deeply as she approached. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked, pulling her close again. Natalie giggled. "She never wears it anyway. Such a waste." "Does it look better on me?" "Everything looks better on you," Daniel replied, his hands roaming her body possessively. I couldn't breathe. Jessica was saying something, but her voice sounded far away, drowned out by the roaring in my ears. On the screen, Daniel and Natalie were moving toward our bedroom, the bed I shared with my husband, the sanctuary of our marriage. "I can't watch anymore," I gasped, thrusting the phone at Jessica. "I've seen enough." But even as I said it, I knew I needed to see it all, needed to understand the full extent of their betrayal. After a few minutes of pacing and trying to calm my breathing, I took the phone back. They were drinking wine in bed now. Our bed, talking intimately. The camera's microphone picked up their conversation clearly. "How long do you think we can keep this going?" Natalie asked, tracing patterns on Daniel's chest. "As long as we want," he replied confidently. "Lucienne trusts me completely. She has no idea." "It's been, 4 months now?" Natalie mused. "Sometimes I feel bad, but then I remember how perfect we are together. 4 months. They had been betraying me for 4 months, since before Natalie's divorce. Was that why her marriage had ended? Had she left her husband for mine? "When are you going to leave her?" Natalie asked, a wheedling note in her voice. Daniel sighed. "We've talked about this. It's complicated. The house is in both our names. Our finances are intertwined. I need time to figure it all out." "You promised," Natalie pouted. "You said by summer we could be together openly." "And we will be," Daniel assured her. "Just be patient a little longer. She'll never suspect a thing." I had seen and heard enough. With shaking hands, I called an Uber. Jessica tried to stop me. "What are you doing? Where are you going?" "Home," I said, grabbing my purse. I'm going home. Lucienne, wait. You're too upset right now. Let's think this through. But there was no more thinking to be done, only action. I was done being the oblivious wife, the trusting sister, the fool in their private joke. It was time for them to see exactly what they had destroyed. The Uber ride home was a blur. My mind raced between icy clarity and burning rage. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm and dignified even as my world collapsed around me. But all plans evaporated the moment I silently unlocked my front door and heard their voices coming from upstairs. I moved through the house like a ghost, following the sound of laughter and murmured endearments to my own bedroom. The door was partially open, and through the gap I could see them in my bed. Daniel was wearing my silk robe, the matching piece to the lingerie Natalie had on. They were feeding each other chocolate-covered strawberries from the special box Daniel had given me for Valentine's Day, which I had been saving for a special occasion. I pushed the door open slowly, and it creaked on its hinges. They both looked up, and for one suspended moment, time seemed to stop. Daniel's face drained of colour. Natalie's mouth dropped open in shock. Surprise, I said, my voice eerily calm. Looks like I'm not the only one who can fake a trip. Lucienne, Daniel scrambled to cover himself with the sheets. This isn't... We were just what? I stepped into the room, my purse still on my shoulder, just having a friendly family dinner in lingerie in my bed. Natalie had frozen in place, the sheet clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with fear and guilt. How did you... I thought you were in Chicago, Daniel stammered. Clearly. I pulled out my phone and turned it to show them the camera feed. Interesting conversation you two were having. 4 months, huh? Since before Natalie's divorce. Were you cheating on your husband with my husband? I directed this last question to my sister, who flinched as if I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. She finally spoke, her voice small. We didn't mean for it to happen. Oh, I'm sure it was all just a big accident, I said, my sarcasm razor sharp. You accidentally took my lingerie, accidentally put on my perfume, and accidentally ended up in my bed with my husband. How clumsy of you. Daniel had regained some composure. Lucienne, please let's talk about this rationally. You're upset, I understand, but rationally. I laughed, a harsh sound that startled even me. You want to have a rational conversation while you're wearing my robe and sleeping with my sister? Are you insane? I opened my closet and pulled out a large suitcase, throwing it on the bed between them. They scrambled to get out of the way. Natalie, get your things and get out of my house, now. Where am I supposed to go? She whined, tears starting to stream down her face. I don't care if you sleep in a ditch, I replied coldly. Just get out of my sight before I do something I'll regret. As Natalie hurriedly gathered her clothes, I turned to Daniel. And you, don't say another word, not one. But Daniel, always confident in his ability to talk his way out of situations, couldn't help himself. Baby, please, it was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I love you, not her. She means nothing to me. Natalie's head snapped up at this. Nothing. You told me you loved me. You said I was the love of your life. He says that to everyone apparently, I said, starting to gather Daniel's clothes and toss them into the suitcase. His wife, his sister-in-law, probably the barista at Starbucks too. Lucienne, stop this. Daniel grabbed my wrist. You're being hysterical. Let's all calm down and discuss this like adults. Something in me snapped. I yanked my arm away and picked up the nearest object, a framed photo of our wedding day, and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered spectacularly, fragments scattering across the hardwood floor. Is that adult enough for you? I shouted, no longer able to maintain my facade of calm. How about this? I grabbed Natalie's clothes from the floor and marched to the window, throwing it open and tossing them out onto the front lawn. Are you crazy? Natalie shrieked, clutching the sheet around her. The neighbours will see. Good, I yelled. Let them see. Let everyone see. What kind of people you both are! By now, lights were coming on in neighbouring houses. I could see curtains twitching as curious neighbours peered out to investigate the commotion. Daniel tried a different approach. Lucienne, think about what you're doing. This is going to destroy our families. Your parents, my parents, everyone will be hurt by this. You should have thought about that before you started sleeping with my sister, I retorted, continuing to throw his clothes into the suitcase. Before you started wearing my things and drinking our anniversary wine and making plans to leave me. Natalie had managed to put on a bathrobe and was gathering the rest of her belongings, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I never meant to hurt you. Save it, I snapped. I heard everything on the camera. You've been planning this for months. Was your divorce because of him? Did you leave Todd for my husband? Natalie's silence was all the confirmation I needed. Daniel made one last, desperate attempt. If you leave me, I'll kill myself, he threatened, his voice breaking. I can't live without you. The old Lucienne might have been manipulated by such a statement, but I was not that woman anymore. That would be your choice, I said coldly. Just like sleeping with my sister was your choice. Just like lying to my face day after day was your choice. I pulled out my phone and called Daniel's parents. His father answered on the third ring. Robert, it's Lucienne. I need you and Sandra to come over right away. Daniel is threatening self-harm, and I can't stay here with him. Daniel's face crumpled in betrayal. What are you doing? Getting you help, I replied, turning back to the phone. Yes, Robert, right away, please. It's an emergency. After hanging up, I zipped the suitcase and placed it by the door. Your parents will be here in 20 minutes. I suggest you put on some clothes and think about what you're going to tell them. I turned to Natalie, who was huddled in the corner of the room. As for you, I want you out of my guest house by morning. Anything you leave behind goes in the trash. Where am I supposed to go? She repeated, her voice small. Again, not my problem. Call Mum. I'm sure she'll take your side as always. With that, I grabbed a few essential items, my passport, some clothes, my laptop, and walked out of the bedroom, out of the house, and I suspected out of my marriage. Behind me, I could hear Daniel calling my name, his voice increasingly desperate, but I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me anymore. I stayed at Jessica's apartment that night, unable to sleep, my body vibrating with adrenaline and shock. My phone exploded with notifications, dozens of missed calls and text messages from Daniel, from Natalie, from my parents, from Daniel's parents. I silenced it and placed it face down on the nightstand. Whatever they had to say could wait until morning. The next few days passed in a fog of grief and rage. I moved through the motions of existence, showering, eating, when Jessica insisted, answering emails from work with brief professional responses. But inside, I felt hollow, as if some essential part of me had been scooped out and discarded. Physical symptoms manifested almost immediately. I couldn't sleep for more than an hour at a time. Food tasted like cardboard. I lost 5 pounds in a week. The betrayal lived in my body as much as my mind, a constant ache in my chest, a persistent nausea in my stomach. When I finally checked my phone, I found myself sorting the messages into categories: Daniel's desperate apologies and declarations of love, Natalie's tearful explanations and pleas for forgiveness, concerned inquiries from friends who had heard rumours, and most painfully divided responses from family. My father had sent a simple text: I'm here for you, Lucy, whatever you need. But my mother's message was different. There are 2 sides to every story. We need to talk as a family. I called my father first, needing his steady presence. He answered immediately. Dad, I said, my voice breaking. I know, sweetheart, he replied, his voice warm and sad. I know. I told him everything, the suspicions, the fake trip, the discovery. He listened without interruption, only the occasional sharp intake of breath indicating his distress. I never liked that boy, he said when I finished. Too smooth by half. And as for Natalie, well, she's always wanted what you had, hasn't she? It was true. Growing up, Natalie had always coveted my toys, my clothes, my friends. If I received a doll for Christmas, she had to have the same one or better. If I made the cheerleading squad, she had to try out too. I had always attributed it to normal sibling rivalry, but perhaps there had been something deeper, more insidious at work. "Mum's taking her side," I said, the hurt evident in my voice. My father sighed. "Your mother, she's always had a blind spot where Natalie is concerned. The baby of the family, you know, but give her time. She'll come around." I wasn't so sure. My mother had called twice more, each message increasingly critical of my hasty actions and public humiliation of my sister and husband. "Couldn't you have handled this privately?" she asked in her last voicemail. "Did you have to throw her clothes onto the lawn for all the neighbours to see now everyone is talking?" I deleted the message without responding. Meanwhile, Daniel's campaign to win me back escalated. He sent flowers to Jessica's apartment, though how he knew I was staying there I couldn't guess. He appeared at my office with more flowers, creating a scene in the lobby, until security escorted him out. He sent emails, texts, handwritten letters, all variations on the same theme he had made. A terrible mistake. He loved me, and only me. Natalie had seduced him. He would do anything for another chance. None of it moved me. The images of them together in my bed, wearing my things, laughing about my ignorance, these were burned into my brain, impervious to his pretty words and promises. A week after the discovery, I met with a divorce attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Veronica, who came highly recommended by a colleague who had gone through a similar situation. In a no-fault divorce state, infidelity doesn't technically matter for the division of assets, she explained, but judges are human and evidence of particularly egregious behavior can sometimes influence their decisions. The fact that it was your sister in your home while you were supposedly away on business, that's pretty egregious. I nodded, taking notes mechanically. "What about the house? It's in both our names. You have options. You can sell it and split the proceeds. You can buy out his share, or he can buy out yours. Given the circumstances, I would push for you to remain in the home if that's what you want, with him compensating you for any equity you surrender in other assets." It all seemed so clinical, reducing 7 years of marriage to columns of assets and liabilities. But perhaps that was a blessing. Focusing on the practical details gave me a respite from the emotional turmoil. That respite was short-lived. When I checked our joint savings account the next day, I discovered it had been emptied. All $23,000 we had been saving for a down payment on a vacation cabin, gone. My hands shook as I called the bank, only to be told that Daniel had withdrawn the funds 3 days earlier. It was a joint account. He had every legal right to do so. I called Veronica immediately. "He took our savings," I said, my voice tight with fury. "All of it." "That's actually good for us," she replied, surprising me. "It demonstrates financial misconduct. Document everything. The account balance before the withdrawal, any communications about it. This strengthens our position considerably." When I confronted Daniel via text about the money, his response was infuriating in its audacity. "I needed it to secure an apartment. You kicked me out, remember? I'll pay you back when things settle down and you're thinking clearly again." As if I was the irrational one, as if I was the one who had shattered our life together. The final blow came when Jessica, trying to be helpful, shared a rumor she had heard from a mutual friend Natalie's interest in Daniel had predated her divorce by months. There was speculation that her ex-husband had discovered text messages between them, which had been the real reason for their split. It made a sickening kind of sense. The timeline aligned with when I had first noticed changes in Daniel's behavior. It explained why Natalie had been so eager to move into our guest house after her divorce. They had orchestrated the whole thing, creating opportunities to be together right under my nose. The realization pushed me to a new low. I spent an entire weekend in bed, curtains drawn, ignoring Jessica's gentle attempts to coax me out. The betrayal felt like a physical weight on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. For the first time, I understood how people could contemplate ending their own lives to escape pain. It was that thought, so foreign and frightening, that finally pushed me to call a mental health hotline. The counsellor who answered was kind and patient, talking me through breathing exercises and helping me formulate a simple plan for the next 24 hours. Shower, eat something nutritious, go outside for 10 minutes. Call my father. Small steps, just enough to keep moving forward. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. 3 months after discovering my husband and sister's betrayal, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my new apartment, studying my reflection. My hair, once long and brown, was now cut in a sleek bob and highlighted with caramel streaks. I had lost weight, too much at first from stress and grief, but now I was deliberately building muscle through the kickboxing classes I had started taking as an outlet for my anger. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who had faked a business trip to catch her cheating husband. She was thinner, yes, but also stronger. There was a hardness around her eyes that hadn't been there before, but also a clarity, a determination. The divorce proceedings were underway, moving through the system at the glacial pace of legal matters. Daniel had initially contested, still insisting that we could reconcile, but when his attempts to win me back continued to fail, he had finally signed the papers. Now we were in the tedious process of dividing assets, made more complicated by his emptying of our savings account and my refusal to sell our house. "You need to let go of the house," Veronica had advised. "It's just a building and it's full of bad memories." She was right, of course, but something in me rebelled at the idea of being forced out of another space that was mine. Daniel and Natalie had already taken so much. My marriage, my trust, my relationship with my sister, even my relationship with my mother, who continued to insist that these things happen and that I should forgive them both. I had compromised on other assets, letting Daniel keep his expensive car and watch collections, surrendering my claim to his retirement account, which had been commingled with marital funds. But the house was my line in the sand. Eventually, Daniel agreed to let me buy him out, though at a price that would stretch my finances to the limit. Natalie had moved back in with our parents after I evicted her from the guest house. According to my father, she spent most of her time in her childhood bedroom crying and playing victim. She had attempted to contact me numerous times, calls, texts, even a handwritten letter that I had torn up without reading. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses or apologies. I wasn't sure I ever would be. Daniel's attempts at reconciliation had grown increasingly desperate. After the flowers and apologies had failed to move me, he had tried guilt, telling mutual friends that I was being unreasonable, that one mistake shouldn't end a marriage. When that didn't work, he had turned to anger, threatening to make the divorce as difficult and expensive as possible. His latest tactic was public contrition. He had posted a long, self-flagellating confession on social media, tagging me and many of our friends, detailing his momentary lapse of judgment and his undying love for me. I had responded by blocking him on all platforms. My career became my lifeline during this time. I threw myself into work, taking on additional projects and consistently exceeding targets. My boss, impressed by my dedication, offered me a promotion to Senior Marketing Director, a position that came with a substantial raise and greater responsibility. "Are you sure you want to take this on right now?" she asked, concerned. "With everything you're going through personally?" "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "Work is the one area of my life where I feel in control. I need that right now." The raise would help with the house payments, and the added responsibilities kept my mind occupied during the day. At night, I filled the hours with kickboxing classes, therapy sessions, and occasional dinners with Jessica and a small circle of friends who had stood by me unequivocally. Dating was the furthest thing from my mind, but 3 months after the discovery, Jessica convinced me to have coffee with her colleague Mark. "Just coffee," she insisted, "just to remember that not all men are lying cheaters." The coffee date was awkward, stilted. Mark was kind and reasonably attractive, but I found myself analysing his every word for hidden meanings, watching his eyes for signs of deception. When he casually mentioned having female friends, I immediately wondered if they were really just friends or potential affairs waiting to happen. "I'm not ready," I told Jessica afterward. "I can barely trust the barista to make my coffee correctly. I'm certainly not ready to trust a man with my feelings." She understood, but gently suggested that I not close the door on the possibility of future relationships. "Don't let Daniel and Natalie take that from you too," she said. "They've stolen enough." She was right, but healing couldn't be rushed. My therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Chen, helped me understand that trust once shattered took time to rebuild. Not just trust in others, but trust in my own judgment. After all, I had trusted both Daniel and Natalie implicitly, had defended them to Jessica when she first voiced her suspicions. How could I trust myself to choose better in the future? "You're asking the wrong question," Dr. Chen told me. "It's not about choosing better. No one is immune to betrayal. The question is, can you survive it? And clearly you can. You are." This reframing helped. So did the volunteer work I began doing with a support group for people who had experienced similar betrayals. Sharing my story and listening to others reminded me that I wasn't alone, that what had happened to me, while painful, was survivable. 6 months after the discovery, I sold my engagement and wedding rings. They had been sittings in a drawer since the night I had walked out, too painful to wear, but too valuable to discard. The jeweler offered me a fair price, and I used the money to book a solo trip to Italy, something I had always wanted to do, but Daniel had always resisted, preferring all-inclusive resorts where he could play golf. The trip was transformative. Away from the familiar settings and people associated with my pain, I reconnected with parts of myself that had been subsumed in my marriage. I wandered through ancient streets, ate gelato for breakfast, took cooking classes, and spent hours in museums rediscovering my love of art history. I even had a brief flirtation with a charming Italian tour guide. Nothing serious, but enough to remind me that I was still desirable, still capable of feeling attraction and pleasure. When I returned home, tanned and more at peace than I had been in months, I ran into Daniel at the grocery store. It was bound to happen eventually in our small town, but the encounter still caught me off guard. He looked thinner, his clothes slightly rumpled, his eyes lighting up with pathetic hope when he saw me. "Lucienne," he said, stepping toward me. "You look amazing." "Thank you," I replied, my voice neutral. I noticed that my heart wasn't racing, my palms weren't sweating. I felt nothing for this man, who had once been the center of my world. "I've been trying to reach you," he continued. "There are things I want to say, to explain." "There's nothing to explain," I cut him off. I saw everything I needed to see. "People make mistakes," he pressed. "Terrible mistakes. But they can change, they can make amends. If you would just give me a chance to show you—" "Daniel!" I interrupted again. "It's done. We're done. The divorce will be final in 2 months. Please respect that and move on." As I walked away, I realized that I had finally reached a milestone in my healing. The sight of him no longer triggered pain or anger. He was just a person who had once meant something to me, but no longer did. It was liberating. A week later, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was from Natalie, informing me that she and Daniel had officially ended their relationship. "It was never going to work," she wrote. "Too much guilt, too much history. I know you probably don't care, but I thought you should know. I miss you, sis." I deleted the message without responding. Perhaps someday I would be ready to hear her out, to consider some form of reconciliation. But that day was still far off. For now, I was focused on rebuilding my life on my terms, free from the people who had betrayed me so deeply. And surprisingly, improbably, I was happier than I had been in years. 1 year after the fateful night when I discovered my husband and sister's betrayal, I stood in the kitchen of my house, now truly mine as the buyout had finally been completed. preparing dinner for a small gathering of friends. The divorce had been finalized 4 months earlier, bringing with it a sense of completion and allowing me to fully focus on the future rather than the painful past. The settlement had been fair, largely due to Veronica's skillful negotiation and Daniel's eventual acceptance that fighting me on every point was not in his best interest financially or emotionally. I had kept the house paying him for his share of the equity, with a combination of savings rebuilt after his initial raid of our accounts and a refinanced mortgage. He had kept most of his retirement accounts and personal possessions. We had no children to consider, which simplified matters considerably. In the end, the process had been cleaner than many divorces, if no less painful for its efficiency. Daniel had moved to another state shortly after the divorce was finalized. According to mutual friends, he had taken a job with an architectural firm in Colorado, a fresh start in a place where he wasn't known as the man who had cheated on his wife with her sister. I wished him neither well nor ill. He had simply ceased to occupy space in my emotional landscape. Natalie's attempts to reconnect had persisted, moving from text messages to emails to handwritten letters. The most recent had arrived the week before a 10-page confessional that detailed her lifelong jealousy of me, her insecurities, and her deep remorse over the pain she had caused. "I don't expect forgiveness," she had written. "I just want you to know that I understand what I did, and I will regret it every day for the rest of my life." I had read the letter, then placed it in a drawer without responding. Perhaps there would be a time for reconciliation, but I wasn't there yet. The wound had scarred over, but it was still tender to the touch. My relationship with my parents had evolved in unexpected ways. My father, true to his word, had stood by me unwaveringly. He had even moved out of the family home temporarily when my mother continued to defend Natalie and pressure me to forgive and forget. That separation had been a wake-up call for my mother, forcing her to confront the damage her favoritism had caused, not just to me but to her marriage and to Natalie herself. 6 months after the discovery, my mother had appeared at my door, her eyes red from crying a casserole in her hands, her traditional peace offering. "I've been a terrible mother to you," she had said without preamble, "and an even worse one to Natalie. I thought I was helping her by always taking her side, by making excuses for her. But all I did was teach her that she could behave however she wanted without consequences." It was the most self-aware thing I had ever heard my mother say. We had a long, painful conversation that day, unearthing patterns and dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. We were still rebuilding our relationship, one honest conversation at a time. My professional life had flourished in the wake of personal disaster. The promotion I had received during the divorce proceedings had led to greater visibility within the company, and I had recently been headhunted by a major competitor, resulting in an even more substantial offer. I was considering it seriously. The new role would involve travel challenge and the opportunity to build a team from the ground up. But the most significant development in my life was entirely unexpected. I had met someone. James was a divorced father of 2 who had joined my kickboxing class 6 months earlier. We had started as workout partners, graduated to coffee after class, and slowly, cautiously evolved into something more. He knew my history. I had been upfront about the trust issues I was still working through. He had his own scars from a marriage that had ended when his wife developed a drug addiction and refused treatment. We were both wary, both hypervigilant for red flags, both prone to pulling back when things felt too intense too quickly. But we were also both committed to the possibility that something healthy could grow from the ashes of our past relationships. We took it day by day, building trust through consistency, honesty, and respect for each other's boundaries. It wasn't the all-consuming passion I had once felt for Daniel, but it was something more sustainable, more grounded in reality. Tonight, James was coming to dinner along with Jessica and her new boyfriend and 2 other couples, friends who had stood by me through the worst year of my life. As I chopped vegetables and marinated chicken, I reflected on how far I had come since that night, when I had watched my world collapse through the screen of my phone. The doorbell rang, and I wiped my hands on a dish towel before going to answer it. To my surprise, it wasn't one of my dinner guests, but a delivery person holding a small package. "Delivery for Lucien Taylor," he said, handing me the box. I signed for it and carried it to the kitchen, curious. I hadn't ordered anything recently. The return address was unfamiliar, a P.O. box in Colorado. Inside was a small carved wooden box with an intricate pattern on the lid. Nestled within it was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery. "Lucien," it began, "by the time you receive this, I will have been gone from your life for nearly a year. I've respected your wishes for no contact, but as this chapter of our lives finally closes, I felt compelled to write one last time." It was from Daniel. My first instinct was to throw it away unread, but something made me continue. "I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did was unforgivable on every level. I betrayed not just our marriage vows, but the basic trust that should exist between human beings who care for each other. There's no excuse, no explanation that could justify my actions." The letter continued, acknowledging the pain he had caused, the damage he had done to me and to our families. He mentioned therapy, introspection, the hard work of understanding why he had made such destructive choices. "I'm not writing to try to win you back or to ease my own conscience," the letter concluded. "I'm writing because you deserve to hear clearly and unequivocally that what happened was entirely my fault, not yours. Never yours. You were always more than enough, and I was too blinded by my own selfishness to see the treasure I had in you. I hope you find happiness, Lucienne. I hope you find someone worthy of your trust and love. I hope your life is filled with everything you deserve, and I hope that someday the pain I caused you will be nothing more than a distant memory overshadowed by the joy you've found since. With sincere regret and best wishes, Daniel." I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the box. There was a time when such words would have broken me open, would have sent me spiraling back into grief and anger. But now I felt only a quiet acknowledgement of the pain, yes, but also of the healing that had taken place. Daniel's apology didn't erase what had happened. It didn't change the fact that he and Natalie had violated my trust in the most intimate way possible. But it did confirm what I had come to believe through months of therapy and self-reflection. Their betrayal had been about their flaws, their weaknesses, not mine. I placed the box on a high shelf in my office, a relic of a past life. Then I returned to the kitchen to continue preparing dinner for the people who were now central to my present and future. As I worked, I thought about the woman I had become over the past year. She was stronger than the woman who had faked a business trip to catch her cheating husband. She was more self-aware, more discerning, more comfortable in her own skin. She had learned the hard way that some betrayals cannot be prevented, no matter how vigilant or loving or giving you are. But she had also learned that betrayal, while devastating, was not the end of her story. It was just one chapter, painful, yes, but also instructive. It had shown her her own resilience, her capacity for growth, her ability to rebuild from ashes. The doorbell rang again, and this time when I opened it, James stood there with a bottle of wine and a smile that still made my heart skip a beat. "Ready for the invasion?" he asked, stepping inside and kissing me lightly. "More than ready," I replied, taking his hand and leading him into the kitchen. Later that evening, as laughter and conversation filled the dining room, I looked around at the faces of people I trusted, people who had proven their loyalty during the darkest period of my life. There was Jessica, who had offered her apartment and her unwavering support. There was my father, who had stood by me even when it meant confronting his own wife. There was James, patient and kind, willing to earn my trust one day at a time. This was my family now, not defined by blood or legal ties, but by choice and character and mutual care. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had ultimately set me free from a marriage that was built on deception, from a sister relationship poisoned by jealousy, from patterns and expectations that had limited me in ways I hadn't even recognized. It was not the path I would have chosen. But standing here in this moment, surrounded by genuine love and authentic connection, I could honestly say I was grateful for where it had led me. Have you ever experienced betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected growth? How did you rebuild trust after having it shattered? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might be going through something similar. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you healing and strength on your own journey.